Thank you for joining us for the Drive Green Ottawa speaker series with Jim Pegg, Director of Infrastructure, Products and Services at Envari Energy Solutions. For those of you who don't know us, EnviroCentre is a nonprofit environmental organization based right here in Ottawa. Our core mission supports sustainable lifestyles, which means that we encourage people to take action on climate in their own lives, in their homes, in their workplaces, their businesses, their communities, and right here in our city. Our work focuses on 4 key areas: green homes, green transportation, green business, and green lifestyle. And today, of course, we're here to talk about green transportation in Ottawa, and specifically zero emissions, low carbon transportation. But before we get started, we have a few logistical notes. Please note that this session is being recorded and shared online after the event. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation so that everyone is able to hear Jim speaking. We will be monitoring questions in the chat box, so please type them in there and we will bring them forward to Jim for a Q&A period following the presentation. Our speaker today is Jim Pegg. Jim is the Director of Infrastructure, Products and Services at Envari Energy Solutions, a division of Hydro Ottawa that delivers energy solutions for large commercial, industrial, municipal, and utility clients in an environment of changing realities and future business challenges. Jim leads the electrical solutions team and constantly has his finger on the pulse of emerging trends and technologies, including EV chargers, EV infrastructure, energy storage, high voltage electrical vaults, suite metering, and more. Jim has over 15 years of experience in the energy sector. He started as a distribution engineer at Hydro Ottawa and moved to take on leadership roles in areas including distribution assets, distribution design, and substations construction before joining Envari. With a focus on the future, Jim is passionate about energy conservation, carbon reduction, and accelerating the shift to clean mobility. Jim is a registered professional engineer who earned his degree in electrical engineering from Queen's University in Ontario. He is also a certified project management professional. So once again, welcome everyone in our audience, and Jim, take it away. You have the digital floor.
One of our focuses is electric vehicle charging and the infrastructure that's related to that to support that conversation. And so I'm going to dive right in. I believe there's also a question period at the end. So we'll any questions that you have. I love the conversation part of this type of topic, and we'll go through those different questions and try and learn from each other. So here we go. So it pays to plan ahead. Why does it pay to plan ahead, and why are we here to talk about sort of having a plan and looking into the future? So there's different approaches to any kind of project or infrastructure where there's changes and things happening in our industry. You can take an ad hoc approach where you deal with the infrastructure needs as they come and look at the different ways to implement things sort of on a one-off basis. But there's also the planning ahead piece where you can say, what are the different elements that are involved, and what are the things I need to think of to try and have the most optimized and effective solution? So that's what we're going to talk about. And some of those things, you know, in terms of the why, might be the competitive advantage. We're seeing in the marketplace right now, we're seeing lots of different consumers ask questions about what makes us stand out and what makes us different. And one of those things can be electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Places like multi-residential buildings may look at adding electric vehicle charging infrastructure to make their buildings EV ready. This allows them to stand out from the maybe the condo building next door that has the same amenities or the same views, but maybe doesn't have that piece ready for their tenants, and so that becomes a selling point for them. It could also come down to, we've had conversations with different EV drivers that say they'll specifically look for malls or commercial spaces that have EV charging that they can pull into and go about their daily chores and business while at the same time getting charging. It may come down to looking at different municipalities and why people might travel to one place versus another. Right now is a great example with COVID going on. There's a lot of local travel going on and people traveling within province or within the country, and rather than flying places, so they're driving places. And electric vehicle owners are looking to see which places have some sort of infrastructure that they can charge at when they get to those places. So the competitive advantage becomes a big part of that conversation. Another reason why, and we talked a little bit about this, was the ad hoc versus the planning approach. If you come up with standards and different ways to plan what you're going to put in, you can take advantage of the different opportunities and options that are in front of you. The other piece is clean and green. So we're all here because we know electric vehicles are a great way to support the environment moving forward. There's a lot of proof right now that we've seen with COVID. You know, there's been a lot of models in the past that showed, you know, the positive impacts electric vehicles can have. But one of the few positives we'll get out of the COVID experience is there's a lot of vehicles that came off the road, and there's some actual real data now that supports the impact it can have to have all these gas and diesel vehicles off the road. So I think that's something that should definitely be leveraged, but it certainly shows some of those positive impacts. So getting started into the heart of the presentation, we're going to talk today about building capacity versus available capacity, and what the differences are and the different pieces to that puzzle. That'll quickly merge into the discussion around charging options, looking at what charging technologies are out there and how that scenario is constantly changing, and what those options can do and things to consider when you're looking at your infrastructure. From there, we'll go into the metering piece and look at the different metering aspects and why it's important to understand if you're going to meter or not meter, and when to plan out that approach with your strategy around electric vehicles. And the other piece is some other important considerations. That piece will just talk about some of the things and some of the lessons learned that we've experienced as we work on these different types of projects. And that brings up sort of an important point. The electric vehicle landscape is changing constantly. There's standards, some standards out there, but there's still a large evolution of standards to take place. And so I think we're all learning from each other, and we're learning through experience. We're learning through conversations like this, which are excellent, and we're learning through different forms. And it's important to have those opportunities, because at the end of the day, this type of change could come on fairly quickly. And the more we can learn from each other, the better off we'll be, and it'll support everyone's success as we go forward. So moving on from there, we'll go into the first topic, which is determining building capacity versus your available capacity. So when you think about building capacity in terms of whether it be a multi-residential building or a commercial building, or maybe it's an office space or any kind of property, or even residential to some extent, you have to understand what the service size is that you're getting from the utility. So each building would have something called an electrical vault, or a main incoming service supply, which would have a limiting factor being the transformer sizes that feed that building. So I realize not everyone out there is an electrical engineer or has that kind of background, but if you think of it as a pail of water that you can fill up to the top, and once you get to the top, that's all the capacity you have. So you have to try and figure out how big is your pail, how much capacity is available. There's a couple nuances to that. One is, in some cases, when buildings are connected with utilities, they will agree upon a loading profile for that building. And this is something that brings up the importance of interacting with your utility or different organizations that may have a familiarity with that process. And that allows you to see what commitments were made in terms of loading profile, and if you have to seek out extra permission or authorization to go past what your agreed upon load profile was for that building. Which takes us into your the next topic here, which is the available capacity. Your available capacity is pretty straightforward. It's going to be the difference between the building capacity in terms of the infrastructure that's installed versus what your historical loading is. There's a few ways that people can look at their historical loading. Some of those ways include looking at your historical bills and trying to get information that way. Another great way is to work with the utility to seek out some of that information and ask them what your peak loading. So you have your typical loading profile of an organization, and different times a year you'll require different power amounts to go into that building for things like electric heat perhaps, or air conditioner units, and different things like that cause different times of year to have a peak. And you want to make sure when you're planning out and sorting out your available capacity that you're not digging into those other power requirements you have in the building. So that sort of takes us right into that next topic, which is planning for any future electrical loads. With anything like this, it's best to try and understand your full picture, which isn't always easy to do because none of us can tell the future. None of us can predict what may come down the road in terms of growth or changing of size of your building, things like that. But if you have any idea of strategic plans in terms of a 5-year, 10-year window that tell you, we're thinking about adding electric heat instead of gas, or if we're converting from electric to gas, or if you're doing other types of projects that might free up electrical capacity, which we'll talk about a little further on in the presentation. So all those different things will help educate you and give you information on this first sort of base piece of planning out your electric vehicle infrastructure for a building. Once you get into that point, you're going to look at capacity upgrades and if they're needed. So I'll use the example of a multi-residential building where you might have, let's just say 50 parking spots, and maybe you only have available capacity to give charging or electric charging to 10 of those parking spots. We're going to talk on the next slide about some of the options you have to make use of that capacity to maximize the use of that. But one of the options that's always on the table is looking at increasing your electrical capacity to that building. That typically involves somewhat of a costly expenditure and is usually something that most people will try to avoid in the near term, rightfully so, because of the size of investment that could be possible there. But there is also an upside. If you have a good understanding of your building and the assets in your building, and you can have a strong understanding of the life cycle of your assets, and if you understand and have a good picture of assets that may need to be replaced in the future, and sort of the timing of that replacement, you could try and line up the replacement of your vault assets and your main incoming assets that limit that capacity. You could time that replacement with when you want to increase capacity for electric vehicle charging, which then comes into the conversation around strategy and how do you maintain or provide electric vehicle charging today while waiting for that optimal time to replace your assets to increase capacity if that's your scenario. Another thing I'll highlight with this whole conversation is that every scenario is a little bit different. There's nuances and things that you have to sort of look out for. And these are all sort of things, the general tips and tricks of things to be looking for and thinking of. But let's go into the next slide, which talks a bit about knowing your charging options. And knowing your charging options can really support looking at all the different technologies that are out there and the different options you have to make use and really optimize that available capacity that you have to use to install electric vehicle charging. So, if you're installing 1 or 2 chargers, you may think, oh, that's not a big deal. But if it's a level 2 charger, when that charger is running, it could be running up to 7.2 kilowatts. At the same time, if you want to go with a faster charger, a level 3 charger, which can be 50 kilowatts or above, there's things like the Tesla fast chargers out there, and there's more and more technology coming out that supports faster and faster charging of electric vehicles. You have to take a look at what your peak load is, and this becomes an incremental add-on. And you have to ensure that your system can handle that capacity, that draw in your system. So looking at the different charger options, you have a few different ways to go, and it all will come back to understanding the different scenarios as well, which could include private charging or public charging. With public charging, you're often in a scenario where you want to make sure that charging capacity is always available. So you want people to pull up to a public charger, you want them to be able to plug in, charge their car, and move on. Sometimes those charging situations will have revenue opportunities tied to them where you can make a bit of a revenue on providing that charging option. In other cases, it may be, it could be staff charging or staff EV charging for your staff that you're providing complimentary. It could be a situation where you have public charging at a multi-residential building. again, where you want to make sure that capacity is available all the time. So you almost have to earmark a certain amount of capacity just for that charger or chargers. Versus private charging can be a bit of a different story. With private charging, there tends to be more opportunity to share that capacity. So make use of different technologies to leverage that capacity and optimize it in a way that says, you know, this car can charge between time A and B, and then these cars could charge between times B and C. So that would be more of a sequential style charging, where the system allows you to have vehicles charge one after the other. So you could have a block of capacity that says you have enough room for 10 chargers, but maybe you can do 30 cars with that because you use sequential charging. But that also brings up the question of understanding your customers and what their needs are and what they're looking for. The good news in all of this is that the EV charger manufacturers have been doing their homework. There are a lot of really great solutions out there that take into account these different needs from customers that have some very flexible options. Some of the options include, again, the sequential charging. Some include the intelligence to say, hey, these cars are charging at the same time. Let's dial back what the output capacity of the charger is to allow more cars to charge at one time. And you can plan it such that your system is set up so that if people plug into the chargers, no matter what time of day, they'll always have charging capacity because of that intelligent system. You just may not be able to guarantee the speed at which they'll be able to charge. It's also important to understand the electric vehicle side of things, because different chargers, like the fast chargers, the level 2 chargers, obviously output at different rates. And this can be useful, but with some vehicles, a lot of vehicles right now can't necessarily draw that full power output. So understanding the electric vehicle market is also very important, because there can be a big swing in terms of a vehicle being able to take 7.2 kilowatts charging at a time versus, you know, most cars right now, I think, and someone can correct me if I get this wrong, probably in the 3.5 to 4.5 kilowatt range in terms of the draw they're taking to charge their cars. So understanding all those pieces come into the play of figuring out that puzzle of how do I best use my capacity that's available. Another way that you can do it, which becomes a sort of a simpler way, where you can take all the chargers and there's the ability to dial back their output. So rather than using the optimized flow where one charger is speaking to the other, you can dial back the output of that charger to say, you know what, I don't ever want you to allow more than 3.5 kilowatts of charging power. And that way, you know, each charger has that amount of capacity, and people can get used to how long it takes to charge their vehicles with that. Again, all these things can be a permanent solution if you're able to meet the needs of your tenants or your customers or your staff, or it can be a stopgap to allow you to get to that point where you're going to do that larger investment of an infrastructure upgrade to increase the capacity at your building. That's why all these different elements certainly play in together, and we'll talk about a few of those different elements as well that could help with this conversation. There's definitely a whole market out there for the smart electric vehicle chargers versus the more basic chargers. When I say a smart electric vehicle chargers, I'm talking about the chargers that have that built-in intelligence. They're connected to a network. That network provides different functionalities that allow the charger to be something where you can generate revenue, and you can set charge rates if it's a public charger, in terms of, you know, whether it's $1, $1.50, $2 an hour, where it charges by the second or by the minute for the charging for the customers, to help pay back some of that infrastructure cost, versus a more basic charger where it's more like a straight electrical device where you plug it in, it's connected so the power flows, and once the battery is full, it stops charging, and then you unplug and you're finished. So those tend to be more cost effective and oftentimes used in things like those private multi-residential situations where you have enough capacity, you don't have to worry about having any sharing of capacity, which allows you to leverage that sort of more basic charger. There are other options as well outside of the actual electric vehicle chargers themselves that can support this. And that is coming through some innovation in other parts of the industry where people are building electric panels and distribution panels. And some of those distribution panels allow for some of the smarts to be built in right at the panel level rather than at the charger level. So you could make use of the more basic electric vehicle charger unit for the different locations, but have them tie back into a panel that has built-in intelligence. That panel, then essentially, if you think of that as sort of the brain of the system, rather than it, the brain being over at the charger, can say, this circuit is getting electricity at this time, this circuit we're going to keep open. And then at some point it switches, or you do a power sharing of the load flow between the different circuits. It's great to see this different innovation coming along. And I can say we hear and see more new things probably each week in this market. And we know there's ongoing developments with different organizations too to try and tackle some of these problems. There's also things out there right now that are being developed in terms of making use of battery packs, where people will have a system of these little devices that will charge up packs during off hours when the capacity of the building is not being used, and then they'll turn around and use those devices to go and charge cars as cars need to be charged. And that's another way, again, to leverage the existing capacity at the building without drawing on that capacity all at the same time. So if you think of it like your kitchen, you know, you have so many outlets in your kitchen. I don't know about everyone on the discussion today, but if you plug everything in at the same time at my house, with the dishwasher going, the microwave going, everything at the same time, sometimes we'll have some issues and breakers will trip. Older house, something I should probably resolve, but the example works in the sense that if you can avoid having everything on at the same time and find another way to use batteries to supply that power so you can charge it in off-peak times, there's some great innovation there. Which also brings us into the discussion of metering options and some of the different charging devices out there, the smarter chargers, as well as the different panels that have the built-in intelligence, are also coming out with different ways to meter that electricity load. And that's the next discussion. Actually, I'll jump to the next slide here, where it's important to understand your metering needs. Will the electric vehicle chargers that you're installing, will they be behind an existing meter, meaning the electricity usage will just be paid out of your existing hydro bill? Or is it a multi-unit residential where you want different tenants to pay for their own electricity bill related to their electric vehicle charging? Or maybe is it somewhere else on your property where you're going to have a separate service which requires a revenue meter from the utility? And you also want to understand the consumption of the meters, the chargers, to see how much they're being used. So there's, as you can imagine, there's lots of strategy that goes into where to put chargers and how much they're getting used, and the revenue and the rate to charge for those, which will change, I'm sure, over time. And that all comes with having good, strong data. And a lot of that data comes from the meters. So with the electric vehicle charging infrastructure itself, the chargers from the different manufacturers, a lot of them have built-in meters that will give you reports. You can have online dashboards where you log in and you can monitor the usage of your electric vehicle chargers on your property. And it gives you some really great insight into the use of that asset. In addition, some of the different manufacturers are starting to look at putting revenue grade metering in their charging devices, meaning that Measurement Canada has approved the meters within those devices so you can actually be used for billing purposes moving forward. So there's some great innovation going on there. Then there's the talk around, again, bulk metering versus what I refer to as suite metering and sub-metering. Bulk metering being that 1 meter at the start of your property, and all your electrical load past that is billed based on that 1 meter. Versus suite metering and sub-metering essentially are the same thing from a technical standpoint, versus the suite metering, what I refer to as suite metering is the utility itself. Whatever the local utility is, has their metering on the individual circuits. So I know in Ottawa, Hydro Ottawa does a great job of offering suite metering services, and I know there's some sub-metering service providers out there as well that that provide different metering solutions. And that's where it comes into play with your multi-residential is a great example, where you might have a tenant that's on the 10th floor, but has a parking space in level P2. And they want to get one bill for their EV charging, or they want to make sure that that customer is paying for the EV charging. So you have to look at what does the metering setup have to be to allow for them to get their billing needs or their metering electricity usage for their condo or apartment, as well as for their electric vehicle charger down in the basement. And with new buildings, that stuff can be planned out. We can plan those things and plan the way the wires run and the infrastructure is installed to allow that to happen. With the thousands upon thousands of suites and units that already exist, there's a bit more to it in that you have to do a bit of a retrofit, because if you can imagine, a lot of the circuits are going up through the buildings to the different floors, and then the meters are actually on those floors going into the units. So the amount of cost and infrastructure work it would take to run a wire from someone's unit all the way back down to their parking garage is just by far too cost prohibitive. But the good news is there's solutions for that. That's where you can plan out your metering setup so that you can either install a sub-metering system with someone that has a licensed sub-metering abilities, or take advantage of utility suite metering services where they can give that customer, and you can set up that customer's billing point. So there's quite a bit that goes into the metering setup itself. And unfortunately, we've seen a few times where it becomes an afterthought, where people build out the infrastructure thinking this is going to work great, but maybe they've forgotten the metering piece, which can tend to add some complications if it's not thought of upfront and planned out with that actual installed infrastructure and how you wire out that building. So happy to answer more questions on all of these things as we get into the question and answer. As you can imagine, I could likely talk about this stuff for a while, but I'm going to try not to get too into the weeds. The next thing I have here is just some more things to think about. So these are some things that we have come across that sometimes customers haven't realized, or important tips to think about when you're budgeting or looking at the future implications of having EV charging within your building or at your residence. Smart EV chargers, those smarts are excellent for doing things like analytics, remote troubleshooting, knowing if the charger is up versus down, changing payment options, taking analytical data from them so you can optimize those chargers. All of those different things are great about the smart chargers, but to run all of those different pieces takes software, it takes people, it takes time. So there tends to be an annual cost associated with having a smart charger connected to a network system, having sometimes a cell card connected so that communication piece is in place. So there's an ongoing operation and maintenance type cost associated, which takes us into the next bullet there, which is a maintenance need. So maintenance needs can vary depending on your electric vehicle charging location, depending on whether it's a public or private charger, a smart charger versus a more basic charger. There's different things that come into play with maintenance of those chargers to ensure software and things like that are up to date, and troubleshooting problems that might come up, as well as spot checks. You know, at the end of the day, some of these different chargers are being installed in public locations, and there's weather, there's different things that can affect or impact the uptime, or what I would call the uptime of a charger, its availability. So there's a responsibility and to take care of those assets as they go on, and from a standpoint of wanting to protect your investment. The other piece with all these projects is equipment lead times. I think manufacturers are doing an excellent job of keeping lead times reasonable. I know right now during COVID, it is a challenge. It is certainly a challenge more than it was in the past. And I think they're doing an excellent job of trying to tackle those lead times and still support customers with getting the infrastructure and the different chargers and things that they need. But with supply and demand, you'll see lead times fluctuate. So it's important to have a realistic view and understanding of what the current lead times are for the different electric vehicle chargers that are out there when you go to implement a project, because that will obviously have an impact on the in-service date of your project. And you want to make sure if you're communicating when chargers are going to be available, or if you have a tenant that's requiring to have an EV charger in their location and they're buying an electric car, they're going to want to be able to charge that car. It's important to understand equipment lead times and be prepared to order those and commit to those expenditures early enough so that you get that equipment in time and with the time to install them as well. And with the changing environments around electric vehicles, as the popularity increases, more and more manufacturers are committing to larger and larger electric vehicle fleets, which is excellent. Those lead times are likely going to lengthen out as manufacturers ramp up production and follow that trend. So all important things to keep an eye on. And the other good one, and I believe there's another conversation this week about this more in depth, but there's different funding options out there. So even with things going on now, different provinces, different states in the US, there's different funding programs, both provincially, at a state level, at a federal level, that support EV charging and the infrastructure costs. One of the great ones we've seen is the ZEV program from NRCan here in Canada, and that really allows some of that cost or upfront capital cost burden to be taken off from different customers. And it's important to understand those opportunities and what that funding means, whether it's a grant in the sense of here's some money, you applied, we like your project, and they give you the money and off you go. Versus, it could be a charger that you're putting in that's going to create revenue where they say, okay, here's the money up front, and there's a payback period for that. So it's sort of like a no interest loan where you use your revenue from that charging infrastructure to pay back those loans. So there's different models and different things, and there's more coming out. And we know that in speaking with our different contacts and different relationships that we have, there's a big focus on this for the future and to help support the EV infrastructure across our country here in Canada. And speaking with some of our colleagues in the US, the same conversation is going on at a state level. And no doubt we'll see some interesting things after the election in the US. So hopefully all things are going in a good direction. And I think the idea behind the funding is to really support that growth, get rid of the range anxiety, and have all those pieces come together. So with that, there's a few other things I'll just mention. These are some of the areas that Envari has some strong expertise in that really help to alleviate some of those capacity issues. So things like looking at renewable energy systems, battery storage, whether it be solar power or building automation, things like doing energy audits in your building to see where that energy is being used up in your building. And there may be ways to reduce your building's draw on your available capacity to free up more of that capacity for some of the other projects that you may have on the go, like EV infrastructure. Lighting control systems is a great example, or building HVAC systems can be a big draw on your electrical load, and there are a lot of great ways to reduce those loads. And the good news is, with all these different technologies that coming out, people are continuing to innovate. And one of the things I'm proud to say about Envari is we're good at keeping our hand on the pulse of the different technologies and ways to reduce people's energy footprint in a building, which can really support things like electric vehicle charging and help get rid of that roadblock of cost prohibitive type situations. So at that point, I am into the question part and happy to have a discussion or answer any questions that people may have. And hopefully you've heard some things today that were of interest or useful to you.
Thanks, Jim. That was great. So we do have some questions in the chat. So Mandy, I will ask you if you can read out those questions, maybe as they came in or whatever order you choose, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so the first question we got was about metering. What are billing rates for the end users? Is there a special app or map that identifies locations and rates billed to charge a vehicle?
Yeah, so the different manufacturers that are out there, such as there's examples like Flow and ChargePoint, ABB has chargers. They each have different networks that they support that have available maps and that show where all the different EV chargers that have been plotted to their systems are located. So you can go into that system and have a look at where the chargers are located. In terms of the rates for EV charging, that's an interesting topic in terms of setting a rate for the end user. Obviously, the big initiative or the big intent with many folks is to try and get the EV infrastructure to support that green energy, green environment type push with electric vehicles. So the idea is to keep that cost as low as possible. But there's the flip side of trying to make sure that the organizations that put these different pieces of infrastructure in are able to get some return and pay back some of the investments that they've put in place, which I think over time will become a lot simpler of a system as the demand grows. You know, as you can imagine right now, gas stations do just fine because there's a heavy demand, and I think that will eventually become the way with electric vehicle charging and charging infrastructure. But right now, that's why we have things like the government grants and the funding to support that upfront capital cost, so that end user cost with EV charging doesn't have to be as high.
Great, thank you. The next question was about enhancing your load profile. So if inadequate and if capital funds are not an issue, what are the typical timelines to perform an upgrade, permit studies, and build out?
Sure, that's a great question. So every scenario is a little bit different. I can tell you that typical lead time on capacity equipment such as transformers and switchgear that's required for a building's vault, for example, can be anywhere from 3 to 4 months, and sometimes it can become longer. It can become a 6-month type turnaround. Often what we'll do on projects like that is we'll immediately do the assessment of capacity and get the large long lead equipment ordered right away, so that we can then work into the detailed design of the actual layout of those vaults to try and optimize and do those different tasks in parallel to shorten that up. But you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and depending on the complexity of the scenario, that can change. So there's no one size fits all answer to that, but that's the range that we've seen. And I think another good thing to know is that, you know, there's different utilities and different municipalities have different rules and approaches to this. But one of the things that Hydro Ottawa is offering or has in place is they have an invested interest in some of these assets within the distribution system here in Ottawa. So if a building has, you know, a customer-owned vault, meaning the switch in that vault is maybe end of life and it's owned by the customer can work with different companies such as ourselves to coordinate taking that equipment to an outside location or upgrading their vault to what would be a standard equipment with the utility. And if it's upgraded to that standard equipment by the utility, then they can turn around and hand over that ownership of that asset to the utility, at which point the utility takes on the ongoing maintenance for those switches and transformers, as well as, you know, 40 years down the road from now when they need to be replaced again, the utility will be responsible for that cost to replace that asset. So there are different scenarios and options out there to really put your hat on and think about before jumping in and making those investments, because there's certainly some considerations to those business cases.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what proportion of multi-unit residential buildings, for example, are likely to run into a capacity issue as we move toward EVs and potentially electrification of heating systems? Is it possible at this stage today to estimate that?
I wouldn't want to myself assign a specific number to that. But I can tell you from our experience, most buildings we go into will not have sufficient installed capacity to put an electric vehicle charger in every spot at full charging capacity, meaning a level 2 at 7.2 kilowatts. for every charging spot. Because if you think about it, that has to all, if you were to do that, it would be all stacking on top of each other to use that capacity. But the good news is, as we talked about a bit in the presentation, there are many different options and scenarios where you can maximize that available capacity in those buildings to try and get electric vehicle charging into every spot in that building. So we've certainly come across buildings where they, for whatever reason, had a very large oversized service, and they've done a number of energy retrofits to the building, looking at their HVAC system or looking at their building lighting and automation systems to reduce that load, thus freeing up that electrical capacity. We've had scenarios where we work with customers to do just that. We try to reduce their overall building consumption and load to free up that capacity, and then it becomes very possible to feed that full infrastructure within the building. So I think it's a unique problem per building. It depends on the types of investments they've made to update their existing systems to become more energy efficient, and it also comes down to the flexibility in terms of the size of and speed of which charging will occur within those buildings. To estimate who has an issue and who doesn't, it's a tricky one to answer, because my view is there's always a solution, and we work very hard with many different manufacturers and technologies to try and find a solution that works for a building that uses the capacity they have to try and avoid that upgrade. But if an upgrade is required, which is, we've come across that as well, we try to work with them to time that in the sense of the vault or the capacity upgrade when that vault would be at end of life anyway. So at the end of the day, people have to make investments in these buildings at one point or another on their electrical system, just to maintain that normal operating life cycle. And if you can time that with when you might want to make changes, that always becomes the most optimal time to make that upgrade or that change. But if you're nowhere near that replacement point, we'll always try to work with them to look at their building, to do other studies and projects to implement and look for ways to reduce their energy footprint on their other systems to free up the capacity, whether it be for electric charging or whether it be for electric conversion to electric heat. I think step one should always be ways to try and maximize what you have before making that big investment. Unless you're at the point where that capacity or that vault is end of life and you're going to be making that investment in the near term, that's a great time to increase that capacity, because it becomes a marginal increase to that cost of replacing that vault. What I can say in Ottawa is there's a large population of buildings, especially in the core of Ottawa, that have very, very old vaults there, and there's going to be some investment there.
Thank you. The next question is, does Envari offer incentives to build up the number of public stations available in the city?
Sorry, does Envari, can you repeat the question for me?
Sure, yeah. Does Envari offer incentives to build out the number of public stations available in the city?
So Envari, in terms of an organization, we work very closely with and keep our finger right on the pulse of the different funding mechanisms that come out. So whether it be the NRCan ZEVs program, the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, we will work with whichever municipality would like to work with us to support getting those public chargers in and taking advantage of those different funding programs from the federal government or provincial governments. And we have lots of experience in that with our lighting group, for example, has been very strong at working at getting the different funding from the governments to support people changing out their lighting infrastructure and doing that design. By that same token, we're doing the same thing with electric vehicles. So we're familiar with writing those applications, and that becomes a bit of a, as I've learned myself, becomes a skill set in its own. And by all means, please don't get the impression that I'm the expert on all these different things. We have some really great people on our team that have some great experience writing these applications and things like that. But because of that, that makes some of that funding available.
Thank you. The next question is about battery walls storage. Are there suggested options or vendors? And will this type of storage be part of a longer range plan for Envari or other power utilities in the province?
Yeah, so I'll address the first part of that question. One thing Envari kind of prides itself on is we're very technology agnostic, meaning we'll work with any manufacturer, we will work with any solution type that's out there that best fits and meets the needs of the customer. So we're not going to go into a customer organization and say, hey, use this because we have a particular relationship with that organization. We will go in and say, what is the scenario? What is the problem or thing we're trying to solve here? And then we'll present the different options that are available to meet those needs. Because again, as much as a lot of the different manufacturers are doing similar things, there's nuances. There's things that are different about the technologies that can make it more advantageous in one scenario versus another. So we want to be able to provide people with that best solution for them, which actually makes it easier for everyone in the sense that we're able to look at different things like different energy storage solutions. So with energy storage solutions, that is absolutely part of the conversation. One of the things, as we talked about with capacity, is trying to increase that capacity. One way to do that for electric vehicle charging is looking at ways to make use of battery storage and taking that battery storage and charging it up during times when you're not using your building's full capacity. And then when you need to charge your vehicles, not only do you have the capacity that's available in the building that we talked about, and now you have another battery bank that you're able to discharge to charge the other vehicles. So that's certainly a strategy that can be evaluated. Often things you have to take into account there are space. It takes a bit of space for the battery storage, but from a business case standpoint, that can quickly become useful. And there's also things to think about with battery storage that, all these different solutions may not solve just one problem. Depending on your building, depending on your infrastructure, that battery storage might be an excellent tool to use to curb your building's load during peak days in the electrical system. When you want to, depending on the class of customer you are, if you can shave your load, you can effectively reduce your electricity bill for the next year dramatically. So energy storage is a very attractive solution as it can solve a few different problems, and the business case for it might be supported by one part of the building in your normal electrical load, while at the same time solving another problem, which might be your electric vehicle charging. So there's definitely multi-pronged approaches to these things, and I would say that's a big part of the message I want to get across today is you don't want to look at all these systems in isolation from each other. And if you can avoid that ad hoc approach, a planned approach with someone to look at all the different aspects and the nuances to take advantage of the different opportunities, you can really come out with a winning business case where you might end up having a solution that pays for itself for one thing, which solves a problem at another part of the building.
Thank you. Very informative. We have 2 questions left, and I think we should have time to be able to fit them in. So the first is, I wonder about the cost-benefit equation of such complex metering arrangements for such small billing amounts. Wouldn't it be simpler to just charge a tenant a flat fee per month or not even charge for it given how small the cost is?
Absolutely, and that becomes part of the conversation too. So when we talked about the billing arrangements and so on, that's another approach that we've taken is take the ability to model out what that charging looks like. So sometimes with buildings and different infrastructure, you can get into a situation where you have to really demonstrate with a model that the electrical usage and draw may not have a material impact on your building's consumption, and I get that. You have to balance that with the fact that there might be other people in a building that don't yet have an electric vehicle, and they may feel that they're subsidizing or paying for your fuel for your car. So that's where it becomes important to be able to show a model and demonstrate to people what the different scenarios are and what those deltas are. And again, that comes back to different types of cars have different draws. There is a cost to install the infrastructure related to electric vehicles to start with. And oftentimes buildings are looking at that particular cost, and having to, you know, with a multi-residential building, work with your condo boards or the different boards for those buildings to get everyone on the same page that it makes sense for the overall building to install that infrastructure. So it comes down to each individual building's approach and how they want to approach things. So by all means, there's scenarios where it can go behind the electric vehicle charging can go behind the bulk meter. As we talked about, is that one scenario where that one sort of bulk meter or one public load meter in a building, and then you have the different costs behind that. But I think what buildings are trying to do is weigh the different opinions and voices, because at the end of the day, I would say today, not everyone is buying an electric vehicle yet, and not everyone is ready to make that investment or that change to an electric vehicle for whatever their personal reason may be. And people want you know, assurances that they're not covering necessarily the cost of someone else's charging. And so that's where the different scenarios have to be mapped out, and it becomes a conversation of education and learning. So there's certainly places like that, you know, in different municipalities in different regions of the world, where we've seen, you know, even public charging become part of a much broader program with the municipalities and things like that. But it all comes back to the right balance between being fair with the different people that are the early adopters, which I'm hopeful that we soon get past the phrase early adopters and it becomes more of the normal. And I think we're getting there, but I think all those different things come into that conversation.
Thank you. One last question, which is a great place to end on. How would a building or business owner connect with Envari for some advice and support, and what does that process look like?
Sure. Great question, obviously, for us. So I'm not sure if you can still see the screen, the PowerPoint there, but
yeah, we
you
can
can
see
go
it.
to our website, envari.com, or you can reach out to sales@envari.com. And we'll have one of our key accounts and sales representatives connect with you. And happy to say we have a very engaged team. So every customer, big and small, gets the same attention. And like I said at the beginning, I didn't want today to be a sales pitch, but more of an informative discussion. So hopefully that's what everyone got. But I can certainly say Envari is happy to help people with their challenges in this area, because we are quite interested. So sales@envari.com or our website envari.com, and there's different ways to connect with us there. And you can email me directly if you'd like, Pegg@envari.com.
All right. Jim, I have a follow-up question to that. Is there a charge associated with Envari services? Does that depend on the scenario, and how does that work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are a for-profit consulting company as part of the work we do. So we do everything from cradle to grave, project management and implementation. So we do have something that we offer related to electric vehicles called an EVRA, an electric vehicle readiness assessment. And for buildings like condo buildings or multi-res buildings or offices, that can range anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. And the reason behind that is it takes a bit of legwork to, as you can imagine, all the things we talked about today, to go through the different unique scenarios for each building. But what we do offer is, if we take on that EVRA with an organization and turn around and do the implementation of the infrastructure, and actually build this out with our partner electricians and organizations that we work with, and manage that project right from start to finish, we'll roll the cost of that EVRA right into the project, so it becomes a discount off of the project.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. I just wanted to ask, because we work with quite a few businesses and building operators, and so that's a good thing for all of us to know. So yeah. I think that basically winds up the session for today. So thank you very much again, Jim, for joining us and sharing all that great information.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully it was useful.
Yeah, no, it was great. And thank you also to all of our attendees who took the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this session today, please don't forget to check out all of our upcoming events and activities that we have this week to learn more. And I also encourage you to check out our Drive Green Bingo and see what that means. Drive Green Ottawa is presented by EnviroCentre in partnership with the City of Ottawa, and special thanks to Hydro Ottawa, EVCO, and Plug and Drive, who have also supported all the events. And of course, to stay up to date on all things green, we encourage you to stay in touch. You can do this by signing up for our weekly Green Lifestyle Digest, the Green Beat, or by signing up for our daily green tips, which are excellent, by the way. And also this week, they're all about electric vehicles. We'll be posting the links to all of these things in the chat, the events and all, so don't leave until you've taken a second to check those out. And now we're going to wind up with our closing video. So thank you so much again for attending, and have a great afternoon.